Rayan had everything one could ever want: wealth, power, and influence. As the CEO of a global tech empire, his name was synonymous with success. From lavish homes in exotic locations to a fleet of luxurious cars, there was nothing that he couldn't have at the snap of his fingers. But despite all his accomplishments, Rayan lived a life devoid of warmth. His relationships were strictly transactional, focused solely on business, not on emotions. For years, Rayan had kept his personal life under wraps. His parents, eager to see him marry and continue the family legacy, often arranged dinners with potential brides, but he never showed any interest. The idea of love seemed foreign to him, something that only distracted from his goal of dominating the business world. His family's pressure began to grow. Every family gathering, every dinner, and every social event came with the same question: when will you find a woman to settle down with? His friends, too, began suggesting that it was time to take a break from his work and start a family. But Rayan, indifferent to these suggestions, brushed them off with little more than a polite smile. His heart was guarded, his emotions distant. He had built walls so high around himself that the thought of opening up to someone seemed like an impossible task. Love, to him, was a weakness, a liability that could cloud his judgment and hinder his ambition. And so, he buried himself in his work, believing that success alone was the answer to everything. Yet, as the years passed, a new pressure began to mount. The world around him seemed to be changing. His aging parents voiced their concern more loudly, and his peers began questioning his choices. It wasn't just about a marriage contract anymore. It became about his legacy, the heir to his empire, and continuing the family name. His public image, too, was at stake. The world expected him to be a man who had it all, and to them, having it all meant being a complete, successful man in every sense, including marriage. As Rayan sat in his modern glass office overlooking the city skyline, the weight of his family's expectations finally hit him. It was becoming clear that his solitary lifestyle wasn't sustainable for much longer, especially if he wanted to keep up the perfect image of the ideal billionaire. But even so, Rayan was still not interested in love. He didn't need it. Or so he thought. For him, the solution wasn't finding love. It was finding a solution that would allow him to fulfill everyone's demands, while still maintaining control of his life and empire. And that's when a thought crossed his mind, something as cold and calculated as the man himself. What if he could simply buy a woman to play the part of his fiancée? Someone who could fill the role for a set period of time, without the need for any emotional involvement. In the days that followed, Rayan started to seriously consider this idea, not out of malice, but out of the sheer practicality of it. He was a man used to buying solutions, and this would be no different. Little did he know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would challenge everything he believed about love, power, and connection. The evening was nothing short of extravagant. Rayan's family had spared no expense. The grand ballroom was filled with glittering chandeliers, an orchestra played softly in the background, and the air was rich with the scent of fine wine and expensive perfumes. It was a scene straight out of a fairy tale, one that Rayan had long since grown indifferent to. Yet, here he was, surrounded by potential brides who had been carefully selected by his family, each one seemingly perfect in her own right. Dressed in a tailored suit that perfectly matched his sharp features, Rayan stood near the entrance of the ballroom, his eyes scanning the crowd. Women in elegant gowns fluttered around, all making a conscious effort to catch his attention. Some approached with polite smiles, while others sought to impress him with their poise and charm. But none of them truly stood out to him. To Rayan, they were all just a blur, well-dressed women playing the part they were expected to play. There was no spark, no connection. He couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of disappointment. His parents, standing nearby, beamed with pride, oblivious to their son's growing frustration. Every so often, his mother would nudge him and whisper about this or that woman, each one a perfect match, according to her. But Rayan was unmoved. He couldn't care less about these women and their superficial beauty. He had no interest in getting to know them, and the idea of marrying any of them felt more like a transaction than a genuine bond. As the night wore on, Rayan's frustration began to bubble to the surface. His family continued to encourage him to speak to one woman after another, but each conversation only left him more irritated. He excused himself from the ballroom, stepping out onto the balcony for some air. The city skyline twinkled before him, a reminder of the life he had built: wealth, success, and independence. Yet, despite all of it, he felt as though he was missing something essential, something he wasn't sure he wanted, but that others believed he needed. In that moment, as the cool breeze brushed against his face, Rayan's patience finally snapped. He turned, heading back inside, his mind set on a decision that would both surprise and shock everyone around him. Standing in front of the gathered crowd, Rayan raised a glass, calling for attention. His voice echoed across the room, cutting through the low hum of conversation. "I'm done with this," he said bluntly, his words catching the attention of everyone in the room. "I've been searching for a woman who fits my ideal, who meets the expectations of my family and society. But I've come to realize that none of this matters to me." The room fell silent. His parents exchanged surprised glances, unsure of where this was going. Rayan continued, his tone firm and resolute. "I'm not interested in marrying for the sake of appearances. If I must marry, it will be on my terms. So here's the deal: I will hire someone to pretend to be my fiancé for 1 year. No emotional attachment, no strings attached. Simply someone who can fill the role convincingly." A gasp rippled through the room. His mother's face turned pale, and his father's jaw clenched in disbelief. The women in the crowd looked at him in shock, unsure whether to be offended or intrigued. But Rayan wasn't finished. "To sweeten the deal," he added, "I will offer a generous reward. Whoever takes on this role will be compensated handsomely for their time. A year's worth of luxury, a year's worth of freedom, and a hefty financial reward upon completion." The silence stretched on, everyone processing his words. Some of the women looked at each other, whispering, unsure whether Rayan was serious. Others simply stared at him, stunned by the audacity of his statement. Rayan stood tall, unbothered by the reactions around him. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and if this was the way to satisfy his family's demands without compromising his own beliefs about love and marriage, then so be it. In the corner of the room, his eyes caught a glimpse of something, or rather, someone he hadn't noticed before. A woman, standing on the edge of the crowd, looking somewhat out of place. Her clothes were modest, yet there was something about her demeanor that seemed different from the others. Her eyes, though filled with uncertainty, carried a quiet strength. She wasn't here to impress him or anyone else. She was simply there. Rayan's curiosity piqued, but he quickly pushed the thought aside. He had made his declaration, and now, he would wait to see who would step forward to take on this unusual challenge. It was a typical busy afternoon in the city, with the sounds of honking cars, people rushing by, and the scent of street food wafting through the air. Rayan, on his way back from an important business meeting, sat in the back of his sleek black car, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of the unusual challenge he had laid out at the party the night before. The whole idea of hiring a woman to pretend to be his fiancée still seemed ridiculous, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it might just be the easiest way out of the situation his family had forced him into. As the car moved slowly through a particularly busy street corner, Rayan's attention was suddenly drawn to something unexpected. A small crowd had gathered near a street vendor, but it wasn't the crowd that caught his eye, it was a woman in the midst of it. She was no more than 30 years old, wearing worn-out clothes that barely shielded her from the chill of the evening air. Her face was framed by unkempt hair, and she looked tired, as if life had worn her down. But it wasn't her appearance that grabbed Rayan's attention. It was what she was doing. Standing beside an elderly man who was struggling to carry his groceries, the woman, despite her own worn condition, gently took the bags from his hands. She smiled at him, her voice soft and reassuring, as she helped him navigate the busy street, carefully avoiding the rush of people. The man, with a grateful expression, accepted her help, and she walked with him a few paces before seeing him off with a wave. Rayan watched in silence, his curiosity growing. Here was a woman, struggling with her own hardships, yet still offering kindness to a complete stranger. It was something he had not seen in a long time, genuine compassion without any expectation of reward. For a moment, Rayan simply observed her from his car, unsure of what to think. He had become so accustomed to a world of calculated transactions, where everything had a price and a purpose, that witnessing something as simple as this act of kindness felt almost foreign to him. There was no pretense in her actions, no attempt to gain anything for herself. She was simply helping because it was the right thing to do. As his driver turned the corner, Rayan felt an inexplicable tug inside him. There was something about this woman, something he couldn't quite place, that intrigued him. The image of her, selflessly helping the elderly man, stayed with him long after the car had turned the corner. The next day, unable to stop thinking about her, Rayan decided to return to the same street corner. He had no idea what he expected to find, but the memory of her kindness was enough to pull him back. When the car slowed near the vendor again, he scanned the crowd, and there she was. This time, she sat on the sidewalk near a faded cardboard sign that read "Need help, please." Her face was weary, her eyes distant, and the surrounding world seemed to ignore her presence. But there was a quiet dignity about her, something in the way she carried herself that was different from the others. Without hesitation, Rayan stepped out of the car, the air suddenly feeling sharper as he approached her. She didn't seem to notice him at first, lost in her own world of survival. But when he stood before her, his voice steady and firm, she looked up in surprise. "Excuse me," he said, his tone not unkind but unmistakably direct, "I've been watching you." Her eyes widened, a mix of confusion and suspicion flickering in them. "Watching me?" she asked, her voice low and cautious. "Yes," Rayan replied, not beating around the bush. "I saw you helping that elderly man yesterday. You showed kindness when most people would have looked the other way. And I respect that." Amina blinked in disbelief. She wasn't used to being acknowledged in this way, especially not by someone like him. The world had long since given up on people like her, those who lived on the streets and were seen as nothing more than invisible. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice wary but not unkind. Rayan stood tall, his presence commanding but not threatening. He took a deep breath before speaking again. "I'm going to be blunt with you," he said. "I need someone to play the role of my fiancé for 1 year. It's an arrangement, no strings attached, no emotional involvement. Just someone who can pretend to be in love with me for the sake of my family and public image." Amina's brow furrowed. She wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. "You want me to pretend to be your fiancé?" she asked, still unsure of where this was leading. "Yes," Rayan confirmed. "In exchange, I will pay you $100,000. Enough to change your life. Enough to give you a fresh start." Amina's eyes narrowed. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had heard stories of people with wealth and power, but this was different. The offer was outrageous, but the amount of money was undeniable. It was enough to lift her from the streets, to change everything. Yet, there was something in Rayan's eyes, something that made her pause. She could tell that he wasn't offering this out of some sense of pity, but rather out of a cold, calculated need. Her mind raced as she weighed the decision. She had nothing to lose, and the offer was tempting, perhaps even too tempting to refuse. Still, she couldn't help but feel uneasy about the arrangement. It wasn't just about the money. She wondered what kind of man would make such an offer, and what it might mean for her own dignity. Rayan, sensing her hesitation, added, "Think about it. It's a year of luxury, of comfort, with no obligations beyond fulfilling a role. You could do anything you want after that year is up." For a long moment, Amina simply stared at him. The weight of his offer hung heavy in the air. Finally, with a deep breath, she made up her mind. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. "I'll take the offer. But I want to make one thing clear, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me." Rayan nodded, a slight smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "Fair enough. You'll find everything you need at my place tomorrow. We'll go over the details then." And just like that, the deal was struck. Amina had no idea what she was getting herself into, but the possibility of a new life was too powerful to ignore. What neither of them realized was that this agreement would change both of their lives in ways they never anticipated. Amina spent the night lying awake, wrestling with her thoughts. The weight of Rayan's offer echoed in her mind. On one hand, she was fiercely proud and had always tried to survive on her own terms, never relying on others. But on the other hand, the promise of $100,000 was life-changing. It could lift her out of the streets, give her the financial freedom to rebuild her life, and offer her a fresh start, something she had dreamed of for years. As she wandered the streets the next morning, she reflected on her circumstances. She was tired of living in constant uncertainty, tired of being invisible to society. The opportunity to escape it all was just too tempting. She had been surviving, but this was her chance to live. Amina's pride had always been a strong force, but it was no match for the desperation to escape her reality. She decided to take the offer, hoping that at the very least, it would give her the financial means to finally break free from the constant struggle of street life. She approached Rayan later that day, her voice calm but resolute. "I'll do it. I'll play the role of your fiancé. For the money, for the chance to start over." Rayan nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of her decision. Neither of them fully understood what this decision would cost them, but both were determined to follow through. Amina, despite the doubt swirling in her mind, hoped that the experience would help her find something more than just wealth. It might be the key to freedom. The transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Amina, once living on the streets, was now surrounded by luxury. Rayan spared no expense, outfitting her in designer clothes and hiring stylists to refine her appearance. She was thrust into a world of private jets, gala events, and extravagant dinners, luxuries she had never imagined. At first, Amina struggled to adapt to this new life. The fine dining, the etiquette, and the high society conversations felt foreign to her. She often felt like an outsider, unsure of how to navigate the opulent world she was now part of. But with time, her natural intelligence, wit, and resilience began to shine through. She navigated these social circles with grace, using her quick thinking and kindness to win over those around her, even as she silently battled her insecurities. Meanwhile, Rayan, who had hired her purely as a means to an end, began to notice something he hadn't expected. Amina wasn't just playing a role, she was bringing a level of depth to their interactions that intrigued him. Her compassion, her genuine interest in the world beyond wealth, and the way she saw people for who they were rather than what they had caught him off guard. Slowly, his cold demeanor began to thaw, and he found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't anticipated. As the weeks went by, what had started as a simple arrangement for both of them began to grow more complex. Rayan's perception of Amina was changing, and so was his understanding of what truly mattered in life. As the months passed, the lines between their arrangement and real emotions began to blur. Amina, once certain that the role of Rayan's fiancé was just a means to an end, started to feel conflicted. Despite her best efforts to keep her emotions in check, she found herself drawn to Rayan in ways she hadn't expected. But the life of luxury, although tempting, felt increasingly like a facade. She struggled with the sense of living someone else's life, questioning whether this world of wealth and appearances was truly what she wanted. The guilt of pretending, of not being true to herself, began to weigh heavily on her. Rayan, too, found himself at a crossroads. Initially cold and detached, he had never believed in love or vulnerability. But as Amina's strength, intelligence, and kindness revealed themselves, he couldn't help but feel something deeper for her. However, the walls he had built around his heart were difficult to dismantle. His fear of opening up and being vulnerable caused tension between them. He couldn't reconcile his feelings with his control-oriented worldview, and his internal struggle led to moments of frustration, leading to misunderstandings and conflict. Both Rayan and Amina were forced to confront their own emotional baggage. For Amina, it was the fear of returning to a life on the streets, and for Rayan, it was the fear of losing control and exposing his heart to someone else. Their growing feelings for each other were undeniable, but neither knew how to navigate the complexities of their situation. As the end of the year approaches, both Rayan and Amina are at a crossroads. Rayan's cold and calculating exterior begins to crack as he confronts the possibility of genuine love with Amina. He realizes that he has allowed her to break through the walls he so carefully built around his heart, and for the first time, he questions whether his success and power are enough without emotional connection. But his fear of vulnerability still looms large, and he must decide if he is willing to let go of his guarded heart and embrace the uncertainty of love. Amina, on the other hand, faces her own struggle. As much as the year has offered her luxury and freedom, she can no longer ignore the fact that she has been living a role, not her true self. The weight of her decisions presses on her. She must break free from the identity she's been forced into and find her own path, independent of Rayan's world. But with a new life ahead, she questions what she truly desires, the security of wealth or the authenticity of living her own life, free from expectations. In a final, unexpected twist, Amina makes a bold decision that surprises Rayan and leaves him reeling. As she steps into her future, she forces Rayan to confront not just his feelings for her, but his understanding of love, power, and identity. Their final choice will shape their futures, leaving both of them, along with the audience, pondering the complexities of love, sacrifice, and the cost of personal growth.